Ever finished an orchestral track and thought to yourself, next time I need a template? I definitely have. Making a template always seemed like such a daunting task. So when I saw this free template by EastWest, I had to give it a try. Did it actually save me time? Let's find out. In case you're not familiar with the concept, an orchestral template is basically a file that you open in your DAW. And when you open this file, you already have preloaded a whole bunch of tracks, plugins, effects, all the things that you probably use over and over again. This saves you a lot of time because you don't have to load everything manually and select everything manually every single time you start working on a project. Our specific template here is, as I said, an orchestral template by EastWest. Comes with all of these tracks preloaded. They are all organized in folders. A folder for strings, for brass, woodwinds, etc. And there is also a folder with the group buses. There's a bus for all the strings, brass, woodwinds, and everything. And we have the effects in another folder here at the bottom. Everything's very clearly labeled and easy to understand. This template uses a ton of different instruments by EastWest. So it's definitely geared toward people who are paying for the Composer Cloud Plus subscription and would have access to all of the instruments in the template. My approach in testing this template was to just write some orchestral music and see what issues I come up against. I tried leaving the template pretty much untouched so you could get a good idea of what it sounds like out of the box. All right, so without further ado, let's dive in. Check out the template, and if you stick around till the end, I will also talk about tips and workflow enhancements that I found while using this template. Okay, so the first thing I liked about this template was it was just fun and inspiring and had a lot of high quality sounds that were just playable. Take for instance this duduk, which I believe is an Armenian wind instrument. I mean, how inspiring is that? You got all the legato transitions, this lush reverb, very inspiring. Check out the flute legato as well. Sounds pretty good to me, and I'm a flute player. I also really liked the timpani actually. It's very full and round. I like it. I also did like the overall mix, sound selection, sound processing, everything they did here to make it sound good out of the box. Check out this little climactic part that I wrote. I am using the instruments just as they were loaded. I hardly tweaked anything. I mean, getting that sound pretty much out of the box, that gets a thumbs up from me. Another thing I liked is that it seemed to be relatively light on my CPU. I was able to have a whole bunch of tracks loaded up and still be able to play in real time without crazy latency. Part of that was probably because I'm using a fast SSD. I'll talk a little bit more about that soon when I get to the workflow tips. Last thing I wanted to point out that I liked about this template was the great learning opportunity. You can go in here and check out the processing, for instance, that's being done here on the woodwind section. You got this EQ and another EQ, and then you could check out the before and after. Here, let's do that. Let's take the strings here in this part. If I pull out the EQ they did for the strings, turn it off and on while I'm playing. Yeah, pretty much got rid of that annoying frequency in that 1 kilohertz range. Pretty cool, and something that I might look for when I'm mixing orchestral tracks. It's also a great learning opportunity for if you'd like to build your own template. This is a great way to have hands-on experience with what is more useful for you, what is less useful for you. And you can also see the way everything is organized with the folders, named, routed. Here, if I pull up the mixer window, you can also see You got some panning going on, different levels for the different buses, tweaking of the levels of the faders. Before I go on, a quick question. Does this seem like something you would use, or does this maybe feel a bit too rigid for you and you like the flexibility of a blank project? Let me know in the comments. All right, so to use this template, you have to use EastWest sounds, right? So part of my problem was issues with the sample libraries themselves, not the template. One main issue that I had was using spiccatos, especially for ostinatos, like pa-pa-pa-pa-pum. You hear this all the time. So I had a few issues with the spiccatos. I have here a little spiccato line that I wrote with violas and cellos. Listen to how it sounds. Right off the bat, I could say it's a little bit sloppy in terms of timing. Now, watch what happens if I play around with the velocities. Say I take the viola apart and play around with the velocities. It changed the velocities, but it changed the timing as well. It seems like every single velocity has a different timing, which makes it quite hard to use. As you saw, keeping the velocities constant helps a lot, but it still didn't feel perfect to me. Another issue I had was the occasional off note. You can rewind that part of the video, but I am pretty positive that note was just a little bit out of tune, a big turn off as far as I'm concerned. One last issue that I had with the spiccatos here was just their overall crispness. When I write spiccato passage, I usually want something powerful. And this was just sort of not cutting it. I have other libraries way more powerful. Just the attacks. Listen to this. I mean, it's okay, but it's not that really powerful, effective string spiccato sound. At least it doesn't feel like that to me. What do you think? One last thing I wanted to say about the sample libraries is that while overall they sound pretty decent, I did feel that some of the sounds were a little bit MIDI-like and didn't give me that realistic feeling. Take this clarinet part, for instance. I mean, it's okay, but I've definitely heard better clarinet virtual instruments. Now, as far as the template itself is concerned, I did run into a few issues, but most of them are fixable. Well, for starters, the template did not come colored. I had to color every one of these tracks myself. I had to go in and color each folder, all the tracks. Another thing is these global tracks were missing. There was no chord track loaded up. There was no signature track loaded up. I like adding this ruler that gives me the timing, and all of this was not preloaded. This is something I added. I also used this handy track divider feature in Cubase to put them all up here, pinned to the top. So when I scroll through, I can always see my chord track and everything. Other than that, I mainly had issues with the mix. In general, this template seems to have been made a little offhandedly. I have a feeling that whoever in EastWest that created this was basically taking the Logic template that Ryan Thomas showed in the official EastWest video and copying it over to Cubase. And there seems to be some stuff missing in that process. If I go into the reverbs here, instead of having the specific impulse response of the brass, it just has this basic impulse response loaded up in the reverb. And the master bus is using very basic processing, not using any multiband or whatever the other stuff that they showed they have there in the Logic template. So that's a bit of a shame. Another thing I didn't like was the way they used the faders. Take a look at the mixer. If I go to here, one French horn track, check this out. You've got the fader all the way up to 6 dB over the 0. That is something I would never do. And I mean, I'm no mix engineer, but from everything I've heard is you don't do these kind of things. A much better approach would have been to use the pre-gain if you really had to add this much volume. I would also have used, instead of studio EQ, I would have probably used frequency, which has way more possibilities in sculpting the sound, especially when you have multiple studio EQs one after each other. You could just use one frequency EQ if you're using Cubase, which again, it might be just because whoever made this was copying a Logic template. But as I said, this is easily fixable. You can go through, tweak your own tweaks, make your own mix. No deal breaker there. All right, so those were the main issues that I ran into when writing some music with this template. But don't worry, I have several tips to help you get the most out of this template coming up next. All right, so my first tip for using this template is let the software download all of the instruments in the template automatically. The way that this should work, you open any one of the instruments, and under preferences, here under locations, you've got this download without asking, which you should tick. And then theoretically, once you open the template, open any one of the instruments, it should start downloading everything. This worked for me for about 95% of the instruments, but there were a few instruments that did not get downloaded this way, and I had to open the Opus Installation Center or the standalone Opus player and just try to download there. It took some futzing around, but if you're going to use this template, I strongly advise you not to have to start waiting for some instrument to download just when you want to start playing it. I would also strongly advise using a fast SSD. If you have a fast SSD with all the samples on it, you can go here and under preferences, audio engine, turn on never preload. What this actually does is that instead of loading an instrument into the memory of your computer and making a huge RAM hog, it just loads them as you are playing. Using the template with a ton of instruments was using up like, I don't know, 5 or 6 gigs of RAM, which is pretty amazing. Another little annoyance that you can get rid of is if you select all the instruments and then move your mod wheel on your MIDI controller, move it up all the way. The reason for that is that many of the instruments for some reason come with the mod wheel set to 0. You start playing and hear nothing and don't understand why you're not hearing anything, and then oh, right, it's the mod wheel. Another similar tip has to do with the articulations that are selected. You have a lot of these key switch patches, which essentially are instruments that have a whole bunch of articulation options in them. For instance, strings that you could have the spicatto we talked about, or pizzicato, or a tremolo, or sustained, or legato. You have all these options, and it seems that they were pretty randomly chosen. So when you start playing something, you don't know what's going to come on. I personally would have liked everything just to start off in the same articulation, probably just sustained notes articulation. So that's something I would consider doing, going through all the tracks and picking that articulation. The last tip I want to give is make it your own. You can swap instruments, tweak the mix, make it sound exactly the way you want it to sound. Does this template actually save time? Well, my answer is it depends. If you're using the EastWest sample libraries anyways and are used to all the different quirks and issues that they have, then I'd say, yeah, for sure. This is a huge time saver. It has everything preloaded. You can, as I said, take the time and tweak it, make it your own. On the other hand, if you're used to using other sample libraries, you're probably better off making your own template, but this would still be a great way to learn about how to make a template. I do recommend downloading and trying it out. As for myself, I did have a lot of fun using it, but I think for creating professional tracks, I'd be better off making my own template. This has definitely elevated my motivation to do that in the near future. What do you guys think? Does this seem like something you would want to use in your projects? Did I miss something? Did you learn something? Let me know in the comments. Give me some feedback. Let's all learn from each other. And as always, click that like button and subscribe to the channel. That would help me a lot. All right, so to conclude the video, I'll just press play and we'll listen to what I wrote using this template. As I said, minimal tweaking, 90% out of the box. The track isn't polished, but I think it can give you a good sense of what kind of sound you can achieve right out of the box with this template. Enjoy.